What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 9 running back trade targets. I went over buy low, sell high wide receiver yesterday, so check that out if you have not done so already. But today is running backs. For running back, we want stable touches, preferably a good amount of targets, and to look at who's been getting lucky and unlucky with touchdowns. Freeman has scored in back-to-back weeks now, but Fournette remains the biggest buy low with just 4% of his fantasy points coming from touchdowns. That's by far the lowest amount for running backs that actually get touches, but you guys already know that since I bring him up every single week. He's gonna explode soon, so look to trade for him. I don't think I've talked about Kamara in a while, but after 13 and 18 touchdowns over his first 2 seasons, just 11% of his fantasy points have come from touchdowns this season. That's the 3rd lowest. We've seen the upside these past 2 weeks from Murray, and although they are still going to use Murray once Kamara returns, Kamara's going to get a ton of touches, ton of targets, and the touchdowns will come, especially with Breeze back now. Plus, they're on bye this week, so he should be 100% when they come back. And also, his owner might be in win now mode. He was likely a top 3 pick this season, and he hasn't produced like it because of the injury and because of a lack of touchdowns. So it is likely that whoever drafted Alvin Kamara needs to win this week. They cannot afford to be taking another loss. If that's the case, then it's not a bad idea to give them someone who's going to help them out wherever their need is for this week. Say, you got to win now. I will take Kamara. It obviously still needs to be a fair trade. You're not giving like a wide receiver 2 for Alvin Kamara. You should still be having to pay high-end running back 1 value. But if you're building a team that is going to win a championship and you need another stud running back, look to see if the person who owns Kamara is struggling, because you might be able to get a deal done. My top buy low right now is James White. The easy part of the Patriots' schedule is over, so they're less likely to be in game scripts that favor Sony Michel. And White has been between 12 and 14 PPR points in every single game this season, while getting extremely unlucky with touchdowns. White is second only to Fournette in how unlucky his touchdowns have been. But honestly, it's even more amazing that White only has the 1 touchdown. Just in the last 2 weeks, he's had at least 3 touches where he should have scored, but he's either been tackled at the 1-yard line or he's been barely tripped up by the last defender. He's been extremely consistent though, so that's the thing. When you're looking for consistency, there are some guys who might on the surface level seem consistent. You know, they're getting 10, 14, 13, 16, like, nice, this is really, really good. I'm getting consistent production. But then you look at it, and sometimes they're getting 12 points because they got 5 receptions. Sometimes they get no receptions, they just got a touchdown. So it's like fake consistency. James White is consistent. If he does not score for you, he's still getting you points at the very least. And when he finally starts scoring, he's gonna be great. So I know he hasn't shown crazy upside yet, but if he's getting 12 to 14 points and then he finally scores, or then they're finally in a competitive game where they need to give James White 10 targets and he scores, well, now he's going to be pushing towards 25 points, and it's not going to look the same as it has been. So he's the running back 34 right now in half PPR, but he's probably going to end up as a running back 2, and he's not going to cost you all that much. So I definitely trade for him now. And then I'd also be trading for Devin Singletary. He played 38% of snaps in his return from injury in week 7, but then was up to 68% last week. They aren't giving him a massive workload on the ground, but that will increase as the season moves on and as he gets fully recovered from the injury. His value right now is more in the receiving game. They have a few matchups down the stretch where they're going to be down and they'll be having him run a ton of routes. So think of him as like a diet James White that also has the upside to get more work on the ground as well. Their schedule was similar to the Patriots to start the season, but it gets a lot tougher in their final 5 weeks. And those are the kind of game environments where Singletary is going to excel over Frank Gore. So I'd get him before people start to realize his upside. This week, we have a new leader in percent of fantasy points that come from touchdowns, and his name is Tevin Coleman. I want to talk about Coleman in this video because he's an obvious sell high after a 4-touchdown game. Any human at any position, besides quarterback of course, that scores 4 touchdowns in a game is a sell high, meaning they're at the peak of their value. But I own Tevin Coleman, and I've never really considered trading him away. The 49ers are a run-first offense, and a really good one at that. But they're different from a team, say, like the Broncos. You know, they also split the carries. So we have Coleman and we have Breida getting a split, kind of like Freeman and Lindsey do. The Broncos prefer to use Lindsey close to the goal line. However, Lindsey has 12 green zone touches and Freeman has 9. So it's not that big of a deal who's on the field. They prefer Lindsey, but they're fine having Freeman out there. The 49ers like to just pick a guy to use in the red zone, and that guy is Tevin Coleman while he's healthy. And we saw when he went down, they didn't shift Breida into that role. They shifted Jeff Wilson, because if you combine the green zone touches for Jeff Wilson and Tevin Coleman, it's at 22 and then 10 touchdowns. If you look at Deebo Samuel, Breida, and Kittle, they're all tied for 3rd on the team in green zone touches with 3 each and 2, 2, and 1 touchdowns respectively. So Coleman might be getting a ton of his fantasy points from touchdowns, but they're almost exclusively using him near the goal line, and that's going to continue. So when you on top of that consider that they're also expanding his total carry volume, giving him all the work near the goal line, and they're a run-first team, and a fantastic running team, it might look like Coleman's a sell high, but it's not like anyone's going to give you high-end running back 1 value for him. So I'm just going to keep him and continue to enjoy the touchdowns. So then the question comes up, well, what about Sony Michel? Because Sony Michel gets a boatload of the green zone touches as well. Every time the Patriots get close, they bring Sony Michel in for the touchdown, and that's correct. But he only has 1 target across 5 games with Rex Burkhead playing this season. Of course, we know Rex Burkhead is now back from injury, and the Patriots' schedule is going to toughen up. So we should expect more games where James White and Burkhead are featured over Sony Michel. We have seen in the past, the Patriots will start the game off trying to go run heavy with Sony Michel, but as soon as they realize we can't win this way, this team's actually going to score on us, we need to keep up, the game shifts, and Burkhead and White are on the field more than Sony Michel. Those types of games are going to happen much more often in the second half of the season than they did in the first half. And that's going to give Sony Michel an extremely low floor. And that's not something I want to rely on in the most important games for fantasy. So I would be selling high on Sony Michel. I'd also continue to sell high on Mark Ingram. He's only playing 40 to 50% of the snaps, and he, like Sony, is completely unusable in the weeks where he doesn't score a touchdown. He's getting a little bit more receiving work than Sony is, but it's only 1 or 2 targets a week, and he's gonna have spiked weeks, and it's gonna feel really great when you have him, like in weeks, I think it was 1 and 3 when he just went off. But it's really tough to rely on a guy playing at most 60% of the snaps that isn't really involved in the receiving game. So we've seen his floor over the past month. He can get these games where he's got 4 to 7 fantasy points, but people still view him as a solid running back 1, and he's not. So I'm sure someone will give up a lot more than he's worth to get him. I want to close with a tip on trading for non-running back and wide receiver positions. I make these 2 videos on running backs and wide receivers, so I thought I'd mention something about the other positions. We're about to enter week 9, so there are really only a few more weeks until the playoffs start, and really only 2, 3, 4 weeks where you can still be doing trades. It depends what site you're using, what your specific rules are, but on average about 3 more weeks until the trade deadline. One thing that gets overlooked is your final roster, what your team will look like when the playoffs start. You should be building that roster right now and feeling great about every position on your team once the playoffs start. Obviously, everyone's trying to get great running backs and wide receivers, and those are the most important things to get right. But don't forget about quarterback, tight end, and defense. The smartest owners are looking at those positions right now and trying to make trades to upgrade in those areas. Quarterback's the toughest one because quarterback trades get done at probably the lowest rate of any position, and because in general it's less than ideal trading away skill position players to get a quarterback. If you can get a really nice deal or you've got like a quarterback for quarterback trade, I'd be fine doing that. But just try and get one that you trust, not giving up a whole lot. But you should be trying to make trades for tight end and even defense. I know they're extremely tough to trade for, but imagine the edge when you have the Patriots defense playing the Bengals and the Bills in the semifinals and finals. Or maybe buy low on Kittle, since he's playing in 3 potential shootouts in the playoffs. At New Orleans, home versus the Falcons' worst defense in the league, and then home versus the Rams' tight end funnel. Because making the playoffs is one thing, but we've all been there when you walk in with the 3 seed, but you know there are a few teams you're just not gonna beat. So you're there, but you have no chance. If you start completing your roster now while you can still make trades and get rid of any potential weak spots in your starting roster, then you'll have a much better chance once the playoffs come around. We don't want to just make the playoffs. I'd rather go down swinging with a big trade than limp into the playoffs with a team that I know will never win. So I just want to make sure you guys know you should always be looking to make upgrades. It might feel dumb trading for a defense, but every little edge helps when we're getting closer to the playoffs. And at this point, we have a pretty good idea where the edges are at defense and tight end. So those are the top trade targets at the running back position for week 9. Remember, you can now see my wide receiver buy low model and the running back buy low model at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Tomorrow I'll be going over running backs again, but we'll be talking about who you should start, who you should sit based on matchup, based on usage. So be on the lookout for that video. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? And if you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.